Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 207 with Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer, brought to you by Osseo Gear. We are changing it up a little bit. We thought that both of us were going to be in a motel this week for the episode, but I'm the only one that's on the road. Don is getting ready to leave in the morning. He had a quick trip home, so we got him in his home office. So we're hoping that this keeps Wi-Fi long enough to get a episode done tonight, Don.
Yeah, in fact, I just got home this afternoon and, just going to reload. I got home from Ohio and getting ready to go to Missouri and then come home for a couple days, actually a day and a half, and then I'm headed to Michigan and do a couple properties there.
A quick stop by the house to throw some clean underwear in your duffel bag and hit the road again, right?
That's about it, yep.
Well, at least you got clean underwear. You got that going for you.
Well,
tell us a little bit about being on the road this week. What's going on?
Well, I started in southern Indiana on Monday and then went to Ohio, and I did 2 properties in Ohio Tuesday. I did 2 Wednesday, and then today, which is Thursday, I did 1, and then headed home. So I did basically the first 4 days of the week, I did 6 properties.
So you were on a mutual friend's property, I believe, today. How did that go?
Yep.
We got to give a shout out to the GBs. They get really aggravated when we don't give a shout out to the GBs.
Well, the GBs took good care of me today. I'll tell you what, we had breakfast with the GBs. Our buddy Grant Nicodemus and his father-in-law John Ritter. It was John's property that I was walking today. Actually, I didn't even walk. John drove me around in a John Deere Gator with a cab on it, so I could have rode around in my T-shirt. But they took good care of us. They fed us good. They breakfast after the property tour. He took us out to a buffet restaurant. Those are some good people there.
You didn't happen to see Trey on this trip, did you? Trey Nicodemus?
No, I did not.
Yeah, Trey, I actually took Trey to Japan in April, and I think he had a good time. We had a good trip, but we've both been very good friends and blessed to know the Nicodemus family. Mr. John Ritter has been a huge supporter of the Lester's Feet Foundation, and we really value their friendship and support that they give us in everything we do, whether it's consulting work or the foundation. They're good people.
Yeah, I tell you what, it must sound like I repeat myself every week, but, every place I stopped, I was treated like a king. We had a supper at an Amish family's home. I forget what night it was, Tuesday night or Wednesday night. But anyway, Ray Yoder and his sons treated us to grilled ribeyes. And the ladies, they cooked up a feast for us, and it was just like one thing after another. We thought we was done eating, and then here comes the next round, different food. They had I told my wife, I said they passed around this big bowl of fruit, and it had, like pineapple and grapes and strawberries and blackberries and raspberries and blueberries all in it, and they handed me that bowl. And I grabbed that bowl, and I wasn't prepared for how heavy it was. That thing was like grabbing a 5-gallon bucket of water. Full of fruit. But just everywhere I went, they had refreshments and just treated us great. Had Steve Shields along. We filmed all these properties for the Whitetail Master Academy. Really, really interesting property in Indiana. And I can't mention the name because this person is a well-known personality and doesn't want his name out there, but you got some pictures that we can show from his property if you got them ready to pull up. So I think the first one you got is that Volkswagen bus that we found in the woods. I don't know how in the world that thing got where it was at, somebody obviously drove it there many, many years ago. But
Can you
I
see
thought
it
that was
now?
pretty neat. Yeah, it's up there. So
So
that was neat on the tour.
I got one question for you, Don.
Okay.
Were you a hippie when you were younger? Did this bring back memories of you to your childhood where you drove around with long hair flowing out of the side window of a Volkswagen bus?
Well, not quite. I was just a little bit young for the hippie era. I remember the hippies because my dad would always flip out on the hippies, but when I was a kid. But I won't repeat some of the things he had to say. But but I was just a little bit young. I was born in '63, and those hippies were coming on in the late '60s, early '70s. So I was a kid. I was definitely old enough to remember it, but I was not a hippie myself. Although I
We
do have
might
long hair.
we might show that picture as the thumbnail with the title of this episode was Donna Hippie.
Well, that might get a few more views. I don't know.
So this thing, I've walked across up against an old vehicle in the woods, but we were actually climbing a mountain over in eastern Kentucky. I was over in the mountains of eastern Kentucky last weekend, and up on this knoll, and I'm serious, I don't know what the elevation was, but just out in the middle of nowhere on the side of a mountain was a John boat. Up on
Well,
and I don't know if a tornado dropped it in there or what, but I mean it was a bigger John boat. It wasn't just a canoe. But it's amazing that the weird stuff you find sometimes.
it might have been the remnants of Noah's flood when the floodwaters
the
receded.
the dinghy from the ark.
That could be.
Well, you had a. I'm going to put a couple other pictures. Bear with me, folks, as you're watching on here. Since I'm at a hotel, I only have one screen, so it takes me a little bit longer to get from window to window. But here's another picture of something that you ran across while you're on the road.
Well, that was that public, well-known personality. I'll put it. This was his cabin, and it was so neat. This giant cedar tree is in his cabin, and they had to bring a crane in when they built the cabin to put this tree there. But you can't see it in the picture, but that one major branch that's sticking out there to the right, out on the end of it, there's a turkey roosting on that branch, and you can see the old tree stand and the old wooden steps going up the side of that tree. But that was just neat as could be.
Is this a hornet's nest hanging right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Uh-huh.
cool. So that's in his hunting cabin. It's got a full size tree in there with got some good bucks hanging on the wall too. It looks like.
Yeah.
Well, I'm more interested in hearing the story about the next picture, and I'm just going to flip straight to it, and you tell me about this because I love history. I love ingenuity from our forefathers and how they used to do stuff. Talk a little bit about what this is.
That is a hay press. So this is in the loft of a barn. And that barn, they rent it out as a wedding location, Terry. You need to go check that out for your daughter.
Okay.
And they have the weddings outside, but then they have the reception up in this barn loft. And this is an old hay press. If you look at the top, you see that giant pulley up there?
Yeah,
And
Pierre, I see it, yeah.
Yeah, and the big old rope.
Mhm.
Well, there's down in the basement below is a horse, and this horse is going around in circles. And yeah, there you go. That's below. So the horse is tied to that thing somehow and walks around in circles and twists that big worm gear that you see there in the middle. And when it does, it pulls the weight, and this weight is like it's solid wood.
Oh, I
And
see
it
it up
pulls
here.
it up and it drops it. Then the guy in the basement pulls a lever and it drops that weight and it smashes the hay. And they actually tie it by hand, but it'll make a 300-pound bale. So
these guys would go out and bring in loose hay into this big barn.
right, exactly.
And so it's hard to tell when this barn was built how many tons of hay could stand on this floor, sit on this floor.
Yep.
And they were making 300-pound bales with horses running in circles underneath, driving this mechanism.
Yeah, and I think he said there's only 6 of these in the world, and he's got one of them.
Look at these they're instead of floor joists, they're big trees that go across on this hand-laid rock wall.
Yep.
So what year was this built? Do they know?
He didn't say.
Unbelievable.
But, I mean, it was way back in the day.
Yeah. I'm assuming all these beams are tongue and mortised and pin and mortised, so
Yep.
it's so cool to see the history. I don't know if it's just as I get older, being able to see the history, or like Bobby did one day, taking note of big trees or rock formations and stuff. I don't know that I slowed down enough when I was younger to appreciate all this stuff, but when we look at the ingenuity of what people the age of our grandparents and their parents did with very little resources like what we have today, it's amazing. Absolutely
well, it was
amazing.
also in Ohio on another property where there was I don't have a picture of it, but there was a stone wall, stone fence. You know how they used to stack the stone and build fences on the property lines or whatever? But the gentleman there, the client there, said that they brought this rock in from across the mountain and by sled. So these horses, they'd load up sleds with these rocks, and they'd loaded them by hand, and then the horses would drag them a mile over to where they built this brick wall for a fence around the property. And Steve and I got some good video footage. I sat on that fence and talked about the property we was on for the Whitetail Master Academy video, but it was pretty interesting to hear that those rocks didn't even come from that farm. They drug them from across the mountain with horses and sleds.
Unbelievable.
It must have took forever to do that because it was a big old wall now.
Unreal. Well, we're going to try to get some more questions answered. You got a really special announcement about your properties in Ohio that are going to be up for sale. We're going to do that in just a little bit. We're going to try to get a lot of questions answered. But I want to make sure that we save time to talk a little bit about the speaking engagements, and bear with me folks just a second as I get this slide up. But we got a big one coming up next week that I want you to talk about, because you're going to be on stage. Actually, I'm going to be on stage moderating this event at the Midwest Sportsman's Classic in Shipshewana. Tell me a little bit about this this event that you're going to be on stage with some of your kind of heroes and mentors to be part of that, and what that means to you.
Well, it's really unbelievable because I've known some of these guys anyway since I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, I looked up to the Wentzels, Gene and Barry Wentzel, who are absolutely living legends in the whitetail world. And back in the day, they are kind of largely responsible for the modern whitetail craze.
No doubt
Started back then, and I would write handwritten letters to Gene Wentzel as a teenager, and I'm 60 years old today. So, I mean, that was 40 years plus ago. And he would write handwritten letters back to me, and never missed a beat. If I wrote him a letter a week, he sent me back a reply a week. And he's authored, I don't know how many books, 3 or 4 books on whitetail hunting. And so Gene and Barry's going to be on stage, and then Alan Foster, who I talk about all the time, a mentor of mine that I worked with for 20 years. And I say all the time, he shaved 10 years off the learning curve for me when it comes to hunting big bucks. Taught me about playing the wind and things like that. Then Bobby Worthington, he started writing for North American Whitetail about the same time I did. And I've said many times, if I was forced to say who the best whitetail bow hunter there is alive today, I would probably say Bobby Worthington, because if you look at the bucks he shot and where he shot them and how he did it, I don't know anybody else that can compare. I mean, the guy lives in the mountains of East Tennessee, which is not known for giants, and yet he hunts those mountains. And I think he's had 7 or 8 bucks big enough that they were featured in North American Whitetail. I know of a giant he shot here in Illinois on public land that was featured in North American Whitetail. And then, Joe Miles, who travels the entire whitetail range from east to west, north to south, shoots just a pile of bucks every year. And how I got thrown in that group is kind of beyond me, but just surrounded by people that it kind of makes me wonder what in the world did I do to get here, because these are all guys that I absolutely look up to.
Well, you think you're in an odd boat. Put yourself in my shoes. I mean, I'm there moderating some of the most historic and pioneer whitetail minds in the industry. And unfortunately, my generation and younger grew up with entertainers of the whitetail industry. And, whether you like them or not, when I was coming up as a young person hunting in my late teenager and early adult years, the Bill Jordans and the Roger Raglins were the big videos on the end cap of your local, hometown video store where you go and rent the, back then VHS tape before there was the Outdoor Channel, before there was the internet, and that's how you watched or gained knowledge. The guys that are on this stage, I hope that people who are, we talked about that barn just a second ago, get a little sentimental of the history of modern day whitetail hunting and land management of mature bucks. The people that are on this stage were not the entertainers. They were the true fundamental pioneers of understanding what a mature buck is and what a mature buck is doing differently. And it's unbelievable and humbling that I would even be considered to be on stage trying to, control the narrative and walk through the process of the dialogue that's going to happen. So, I just want to encourage everybody that if you're anywhere close to Shipshewana, that Friday night event will go down in history as some of the most, fundamental sound pioneers that know more about whitetail. There's going to be more knowledge of whitetail and how to hunt them on that stage than probably anywhere that's ever been combined in one place. But I just don't think my generation truly understands, because we grew up in a different era of entertainment of deer hunting, not what these guys came up when you were learning and trading these, pen pal males with the Wensels. I've ordered some of Mr. Wensel's books off Amazon because I had some, but I don't know where they're at. And I've ordered some to have one of the true pioneers of this sport sign them for me to put in my kind of heirloom collections to put on the shelf. That's hopefully it comes in before then.
Well, the other thing is, I talked to Derek there, who is running the show, and he thinks this is probably going to be a bigger audience than the Tony LaPratte debate that Tony and I had a couple years ago. There's people coming from Pennsylvania and Ohio and Missouri and Iowa, from all over for this event. And I promise you that the entertainers of the group, the people that are going to make it worthwhile, are the Wensel brothers. I've got personal stories that I could tell about them guys from back in the 1980s when we were. So when Buckmasters started back in the 80s, they had the very first Buckmasters Classic down in Alabama. And I was in my early 20s, and Buckmasters was so new that hardly anybody knew about them. And this was one of the kickoff events for that. But they invited all the big names of that time, and the Wensel brothers were part of it. And I somehow got drugged down there, and It was just blind luck or one of them God things. But we stayed in this big lodge, and my room was right across the hallway from the Wenzel's room. And I was in heaven because it was a big, long hallway, and upstairs in this lodge, nothing but bedrooms on both sides. And there must have been 10 bedrooms, 5 on each side of that hallway. And I was at the very end on one side, the Wenzels were at the very end on the other side, so we was right across from each other. And I spent the week, and they were in my room, I was in their room. And I mean, these are guys that I literally admired. They were my heroes, and there I was in the same room sitting on the bed talking to these guys. And I think about some of the things that happened that week, and I probably shouldn't share them on this podcast, but I'm going to get them guys aside at this event, and I'm going to make sure they remember what happened at that event. I'll just put it this way: Barry Wenzel walked down that hallway, and the bedroom door was open on some other celebrity's room, and that celebrity was in his room buck naked, standing in front of a mirror looking at himself. I won't say who the other celebrity was, but I'm going to make sure Barry Wenzel remembers that whenever I see him next week.
It sounds like a modern day Instagram post is what it says. we might need to edit that out.
I don't know anything about that. It's just, but I'll tell you, it was funny.
Oh boy, I might get in trouble for that one.
I laughed so hard at that when Barry came in there and told us what he had just seen. I mean, 40 years later, it's still funny.
Oh, we'll have to ask him about that. But we hope to see you in Shipshewana. I have a very, very, very big announcement for Luster's Feet that is going to be made at this show, and we're going to keep it a secret until this show. But I hope, and we'll talk about it on the podcast afterwards for those who aren't there. But we have been absolutely blessed beyond measure, and are going to be sharing some, let's just say God's been moving in a lot of different ways. And we're happy and excited to share some news about Luster's Feet and how we're going to continue to grow and follow, I guess, some open doors that God has opened for us to continue to try to serve people. So big announcements, big events coming in Shipshewana next week. We hope to see you there. I'd like to answer a couple questions before we hit talk a little bit about the properties that you're going to be selling in Ohio, if that's all right, Don. You good with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. It's going to take, again, be patient with me. It takes me a minute when I only have one screen. You should have the first question up.
Yep, this one comes from Scott Barkman from Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. He says, Don, I'm an avid listener. Enjoy you and Terry's tips, tricks, and stories. Tell us about your first food plot you ever put in. Who gave you the idea to plant a plot? Was it a success or failure? What did you plant, and did you kill a buck over it? Hearing your past stories are always interesting and intriguing. Thanks for all the entertainment and laughs. Oh, I remember my first plot. Absolutely, I do remember it. I got the idea of planting food plots from my friend Todd Hewing. He was one of the first guys doing food plots and serious wildlife management way back in the day, and invited me down shortly after I met him to hunt his property, and he put me over a plot of standing soybeans and standing corn and convinced me that soybeans were way better than corn. But the next fall, I was planting my own food plots, or at least one, and I was reading about these special oats that the deer just loved, buck forage oats. And I drove I drove over an hour to get me some buck forage oats from this seed place, and planted those. It was probably about maybe a half-acre plot, 3/4 of an acre plot. It was in the wrong spot on my farm. I didn't know it at the time, but I cleared a bunch of trees, planted that plot, and then I ended up planting trees back there. But I remember the first time that I seen a deer feed in that plot. It was a lone doe by herself, no other deer, just one single doe. came out and fed in that plot, and I thought this is just the neatest thing. This deer is feeding on something that I planted for deer. Just unbelievable feeling. I did not shoot a buck over that plot. Don't even know what year it was, but it's been decades ago now. But buck forage oats were brand new, so probably you could go back to the year that they were started in business, and that would have been the year this happened.
Yeah, I can't imagine the kind of journey with people my age. It was kind of, and the people coming up right now watching this podcast, it's food plots and land management is a general activity associated with the sport. Back then, I mean, it wasn't number one. The only way you could get information was by magazines, right?
Absolutely.
And then you were starting to do these things like that were on the leading edge of just stuff for deer. It was kind of unheard of. I remember my grandfather telling me about standing on tree limbs and the crotches of trees to bow hunt back then. There wasn't anything like a tree stand to go in. If anything, it was 2x4s nailed to a crotch of a tree with a couple cross braces in it that you shimmied up in. But back in those days, it really is interesting to me to hear you talk about that, because to see looking back on it, you were excited to see one doe feeding in one plot, and look at what your farm is today.
Yeah, and that plot is now part of my sanctuary. But yeah, it's come a long way. I mean, I was so excited to see one deer feeding in a plot that I actually planted for deer. It was just unbelievable.
All right, we'll go to question number 2 when I get it up here in just a second. There, you should have it.
Yep, this one comes from Michael Gruber from Mosinee, Wisconsin. Hope I said that right. But it says, hi, Don and Terry. I recently purchased a refurbished John Deere 7000 series planter for doing my food plots. My question is about converting the soybean pounds per acre planting recommendations to plant population per acre. For the NutriCrave corn, I know the recommendation is 26,500 plants per acre, and it's easy to see which settings to use to plant close to that population per acre right in the manual. I see you have a chart for the Genesis drills, but for those of us using a planter like this, what do 50 pounds, 60 pounds, 75 pounds, and 90 pounds per acre equal in terms of plants per acre? I have certain areas next to my clover that get browsed heavier and would like to increase my planting rates in these areas. Just would like to know a ballpark of what the population is for each of those rates. Appreciate the help and look forward to listening to the podcast every Sunday. Well, Michael, I don't have the population for each of those pounds, but I can tell you this. In a 50-pound bag of our real-world soybeans, each year there's going to be roughly about 135,000 to 140,000 seeds in a 50-pound bag, and you can do the math from there. But if you would just figure 135,000 seeds per 50 pounds, you can get your population to whatever you want.
The only thing I will tell people that are planting soybeans with a planter on 30 or 36-inch rows is you really got to watch your herbicide program and your weeds. And quite honestly, with you having, the new pH Outdoors drill, and using the Genesis in the past, those rows are much closer. I think they're like 6.5 inches apart.
7.5.
7.5. So when those beans come up, they canopy much quicker. Or if you broadcast your beans, they're coming up much quicker and canopying. So you can get great yields by planting beans in rows. There's no doubt about it. But you either need to double up your rows and make 2 strips and split the difference, or really watch your herbicide application, because you're going to have sunlight on the floor a lot longer until those beans bush out. And the beauty of soybeans is they react to their open space. They'll bush out and cover that ground, and you'll still end up with a lot of beans per acre. But just remember that you got exposed floor for much longer and watch your weed control.
Yeah, I much prefer a drilled soybean plot than 30-inch or 36-inch rows for the reason that you suggest, Terry. That's a great point. Also, a couple other things to throw out there is he mentioned the stickers that Real World's providing free of charge. Anybody that makes a purchase, you get if you ask for it, you'll get a sticker to put on the inside lid of your Genesis drill, and it'll give you the settings for every Real World product. He mentioned the different rates for soybeans: 50, 60, 75, and 90 pounds. So you guys that are going to plant soybeans this spring in your plots, you don't have to plant 50 pounds per acre. 50 pounds is ideal if you don't have any browse pressure. I got a little bit of browse pressure, so I plant about 60. If you got more browse pressure, you can plant 100 pounds per acre and get a good stand. And even if there's areas of your plot that don't get browsed heavy, those soybeans are going to utilize the space they're given. You're going to get roughly the same amount of grain. It's just going to be spread out on more plants than if you
instead of having one long
browsed
stem with a lot of beans, the bean will bush out and cover more space. But once that canopy forms together, you'll end up with the same amount of pods most of the time. I have to, because of the amount of turkeys that I have, I plant about 80 pounds an acre. So I go even heavier. Plus, I'm broadcasting, so I lose a little bit of germination when I lightly drag them in. I know that I'm losing some germination because I get probably some of them too deep or that birds pick off the top. But when that first little bean sprout just goes and it breaks through like that and has two little leaves on it, that is probably the most attraction that soybean will ever have for browse pressure, where they come and nip the top of it. So if you have a lot of deer, you need to throw more at it to where it won't kill that plant when they nip the top off.
Yeah, another soybean story from this week I'll share is, the Harrisburg show is going on this week, the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania sports show, the big, what do they call it, the NRA show now, I think it's called. But, since Real World came out with our soybeans, the sales of Real World soybeans have grown every year for 15 straight years, and that don't happen if you don't have a good product. And when you got a good product, the competition tries to get on the bandwagon. But I got a report from that show that one of these knockoff soybeans that's come on the market in the last year, someone that I know has planted both those side by side last year, and confirmed what I suspected. He said that the deer devoured his Real World soybeans and barely touched the others until the Real World beans were gone. So, guys, listen to this. If you want to try another brand of soybeans, that's great. Go for it. But I'd suggest you put a bag of Real World right next to them and see the difference for yourself. Don't just fall for the marketing. There's a reason that Real World soybeans have grown in popularity for 15 straight years. I bet there's not another product in the entire hunting industry that can honestly be said sales have grown for 15 straight years.
Well, and the fact of the matter is we still test new beans every year. Looking for the next high oil variety. And, what we've learned through different things is just because it's high oil doesn't mean that it's as attractive. The compounded GMO traits that you get are actually working against the attractiveness of a soybean. And we'll be coming out with a lot more information over the next couple of years on this. But just to go to a feed mill and get a tissue analysis of a plant and say, I want this variety to put into a soybean to market for food plotters, it ain't going to cut it, guys. I mean, the amount of testing that we've done over 15 years wasn't just to start it, it's to maintain it and improve it every single year.
And Terry and I both got an email this week from Dwayne Hopkins, our seed guy, about our soybeans. He was pretty excited about the analysis on one of the beans in our blend. If you want to just say we're selling another ag bean, you go right ahead. You're the one missing out. We've heard plenty of the naysayers and haters on the internet, but you're selling yourself short if you don't at least try a bag and compare them to whatever you're planning.
All right, we're going to do one more, and then we'll take we'll pivot and talk about your properties for a little bit, because I know a lot of people want to learn about these properties that you have for sale in Ohio. But let's answer this question first.
All right, this one comes from Tyler Gehrig from Danville, Kansas. Says, hey, fellas, in the most recent podcast, you guys talked about shorter grasses. I'm getting ready to plant about 5 acres of grass. As an avid upland hunter, I would like to keep the grass shorter so my children and I can walk through it together, but would also love to have a few deer bed in it as well. Will a shorter grass blend like you just decided, I think you meant described, hold deer? Does Real World Wildlife Products offer a short blend? Thanks and God bless. Tyler, the deer don't like to bed in shorter grasses as much as they do taller ones, but Real World does have a shorter CRP blend with shorter grasses in it, and we can also custom blend in any native seed mix that you can possibly come up with. Wildflowers, pollinators, special CRP blends. We custom blend for customers just all the time, every week, or every few days this time of the year, multiple times a week.
Yeah, so we get requests almost every day where it comes in, and they'll give us a chart of whatever conservation program they're in, and we can quote that based on that chart.
And we also have some standard CRP blends on our website. We got a tall grass mix and a short grass mix and a pollinator mix that will work with most programs. Those were designed more for economic reasons than anything. They're going to be some cheaper mixes. We can make them as expensive as you want them, but those will fit a lot of CRP programs. Save you a lot of time instead of having a custom mix made and a little bit of money. You can buy those. But from what you've described, and you're wanting some deer habitat in there, I would suggest you throw a little bit of Real World switchgrass in your blend. Not much. I mean, I'm talking if you want to walk through it with your kids and such, you probably don't want any more than about 1 pound per acre in the mix with your other short grass mixes.
What's that going to do? What's the reason for that, Don?
Well, there'll be some taller clumps of switchgrass out there that it'll encourage the deer to bed in that grass field a whole lot more, which is what he's wanting. Those taller clumps of switchgrass scattered throughout the field, the deer will bed right at the base of them typically, and you'll just get a whole lot more deer bedding in your field than if it's 100% to shorter grasses.
So you're thinking that as the kids go to walk through it, there'll be these clumps that they can just walk around the taller stuff, is what you're
exactly. Yeah,
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good question. I haven't heard that explanation before. Let's talk a little bit about these properties that you have up for sale, and there's one of them specifically that we want to give people a heads up to. I'm going to share my screen, and you can just walk through how people can find it as I kind of navigate a little bit here with the shared screen on YouTube.
Yeah, so really there's only one property for sale at the moment. So I've got a couple of business partners. I actually met both of them that started out as consulting clients, became friends, and became business partners. And we've been buying properties primarily in Ohio and developing those properties. I go in and put the plan together. One of the partners has the heavy equipment to come in and implement the plan. And we'll develop the property, hunt them for a couple of years. We'll put new blinds up. We'll put feeders on them, push out food plots where they need to be. Typically, we hunt them for at least a season so we can make sure that we got our blinds and such in the right spot, and then put them up for sale. Well, we've just listed a 174-acre property in Washington County, Ohio, that we've spent the last 2 years developing. I can tell you that there has not been a single animal shot on that property the last 2 seasons. It is absolutely loaded with game. It's the one I've been talking about that I said I've got 12 Reconyx cell cameras. One camera is on this property. The other 11 are on different properties in Illinois and Iowa. This one camera on this property gets more pictures than the other 11 combined. I can't tell you how many times Ron has had to go in and change the batteries on it. But turkeys, man, you talk about turkeys. You could shoot more turkeys on this place than you could count. If you can't kill a turkey the first day on this property, there's something wrong with you, because all you got to do is get in one of them blinds, and you're going to see turkeys. Yep. But anyway, there's also a really good buck on this property that, to my knowledge, he's still alive. I was going through a series of pictures this evening of that buck, and from the best I can tell, he's got 17 points. He's got 9 on one side and 8 on the other, and he's definitely a young deer. He looks like a 3-year-old to me. That's a deer that could be 200 inches. Yeah. But
so let's talk a little bit about where people go. We're sharing, if you can see the screen, right?
Yep.
So this is your Higgins Outdoors website. The best way to find this is to start there, right?
Yeah, go to the Higgins Outdoors website, go to Turnkey Hunting Properties page. You're going to see about 3 different properties listed there, but go to the Washington County, 174 acres. And on that page, there's a link to Kaufman Auctions. Kaufman Realty out of Ohio has got this auction listed on their website. So there's a link from my website to theirs, and there Terry is showing the Kaufman page. And you can start bidding right now. The bidding will end on March 14th at 6 p.m. There's going to be on March 6th, if you want a property tour, there'll be ATV tours from 3 to 5 p.m. But if you want to look at it at any other time, it's not open for the public to just go have a free-for-all. We'll have every Tom, Dick, and Harry there, looking for shed antlers and just trying to see what kind of property design it is. If you're caught on this property without permission, you will be arrested. I'll put that out there. We have cameras all over the place, and we'll get your picture through a cell camera immediately. But you are definitely welcome to look at it. You just need to call us first or call the realtor. All that information is on this Kaufman page. Again, go to Kaufman Realty page, kaufmanauctions.com, or go to higginsoutdoors.com, and there's a link there that'll take you to it. You are back.
Yeah, I was afraid of that. Internet times out on hang tight. Okay. So the last thing I heard was you will be prosecuted if you're arrested if you're on there. Just pick it up with a whoa, hang on. Yeah. All right, I think we're okay. Hopefully it won't happen again. Yeah, go ahead.
So anyone that's interested in this property is absolutely welcome to come see it. You just need to get permission first. Call the realtor there at Kaufman Realty, and be glad to take you. Ray Yoder is the realtor from Kaufman. He'll be glad to show you the property.
Still there?
I'm there.
All right, I thought we lost you again. All right, so let's bounce in and look at our next question. Make sure you reach out. Go to Higgins Outdoors page, then go to the Turnkey Properties, and that's the easiest way you're going to find information on that property. So we'll put this one up next.
Next question comes from Rick Maga from Greensburg, PA. I seen that Maga name, and I thought somebody's playing with me. And that's a fictitious name, but I did my research, and Rick is a real legitimate person from Greensburg, Pennsylvania. He says, I believe I've heard you say that supplemental feeding or highly nutritional diet for a deer can help with fighting off chronic wasting disease. Wouldn't the state's agency's deer culling be a form of increasing the amount of food? Less deer would mean more abundant food. Also, regarding supplemental feed, what are some options that are cost effective that isn't just corn? I am interested in the Whitetail Master Academy, but feel it's pretty much geared to landowners and land management strategies. Does it provide any benefit to public land hunters? Thanks for a great podcast. Hope you guys have a great year. Well, Rick, providing more feed to the deer is not an issue. In most parts of the country, the deer have plenty to eat. In fact, in many places, the deer herds are down from what they've been, and there's no short supply of food. The issue is a lack of some key nutrients in some parts of the deer's range, based on whatever soil types and things like that, nutrients in the soil. So no, these culling programs are going to do nothing for the nutrition aspect of the deer, nothing whatsoever. It's a ridiculous approach, in my opinion. I've seen a couple of celebrities trying to encourage people to, participate in these chronic wasting programs by having their deer tested and this and that. I do just the opposite. I encourage you not to help these people come in and wipe out your deer herd because there might be a CWD deer in the area. Make your own choice, but call the government at your peril. I'll leave it at that for that part. You was looking for a better option than just corn for supplemental feeding, and one that is cost effective. The thing I would direct you to is the Real World Maximizer Concentrate pellet. That pellet's got everything that a deer needs, every vitamin, every mineral. It's got the humic acid. You mix that pellet with the corn and other grains at a rate of 10% or 200 pounds per ton of feed. And that will get the nutrient content of your feed up. Using your own grain, it'll save you the shipping cost of a complete feed. That would be the best option for a higher quality feed than just shelled corn. The other question was about the Whitetail Master Academy geared more for land management and not public land hunters. I would say that's fair. There's some things that would help you no matter where you hunt, but the vast majority of it is definitely going to be for someone that's, managing a property. Whether they own it or not, it's kind of irrelevant, but if they're doing property management of any sort, there's things on there that will definitely help. There's a few videos that you could take the lessons learned and apply them on public land, but the vast majority, I would say no.
Yeah. Okay. Should have it now.
Yep. The last one, I guess it's the last one, maybe not.
We got one more.
Okay. This one comes from Adam Kersey from Hastings, Florida. He says, "Hi, Don and Terry. Love the podcast. I met Don at the seminar in Florida a few weeks ago, and I must say I was blown away with how humble you are. Taking the time to talk with me meant a lot. My question is about bedding cover. I purchased 160 acres in Kentucky last March, and most of my property is wooded with very little to no undergrowth. I was thinking of cutting a portion of the trees down to allow sunlight to reach the ground, like you showed in the slides during the seminar. How big of an area do you think is needed to accomplish this? Is 1 acre enough for a good bedding area? Also, with living in Florida and limited vacation time, I can only visit my property 2 weeks out of the year for habitat improvements. Aside from creating bedding cover, what are some other ideas that can be done with a limited time to attract and hold mature bucks?" Well, Adam, appreciate the compliments and you coming out to that seminar. As far as your Kentucky property, I think you want to utilize the whole property as much as you can. If you got 40 acres, why you just want to make a 1 acre bedding area? Make a 40 acre bedding area. If it was me and I was in your situation where you're not going to be able to go up and plant and maintain food plots all the time, I would go in and I would annihilate a large portion of that property to let the sunlight get in and create some bedding cover. I would do it strategically, though. If you've got good stand locations in certain areas and such, I would be looking to provide some food for those deer as well. Besides the browse that you're going to provide by letting that sunlight in, I'd be looking to establish some things that those deer can't find elsewhere in that area, like fruit trees, pear trees, apple trees, persimmons. I'm guessing there's probably several persimmons in Kentucky, in in your region. I'm just making an assumption there, so I would not waste too much time planting a bunch of persimmon trees. But pear trees would be a good option. Enhance your stand locations by clearing and getting some sunlight in, and then planting a couple pear trees in that opening to just give those deer another reason to come by. Because once you get those pear trees established, it's done. You don't have to go back every year and mess with them at all. But that first year is critical for survival. So, I would spend my time, planting those trees, and I would mulch them really good. You're not going to be able to get up there in the summertime and, water them, take care of them like they need to be, but mulch them real good, cage them to keep the deer off from browsing them hard. They make a product, a moisture absorbing gel that you can get at a lot of nursery supply places. When you plant that tree, you sprinkle that. It's a granular form, kind of looks like salt, really. You sprinkle that in the hole as you're backfilling, and each one of those little granules will absorb like 300 or 400 times its weight in water, and it'll swell actually. So that will help keep those trees alive during drought conditions. So just I would go in there and I'd do that, and with the idea that you're not going to be able to take care of them, and once you get them established, it's good forever. You come back the rest of your life, and those pear trees will be there producing or whatever it is you decide to plant. But there's a lot of things you can do like that you don't have to go in there with equipment and own equipment. And that doesn't not only goes for you living out of state, but there's a lot of people that might own a small property and they just don't have the funds to buy a tractor and all the equipment. You can plant fruit trees, and those things are going to be pulling in deer just like a food plot will, and do it one time, and you don't have to put the labor and expense out every year.
He's not going to be happy with me talking about him on the podcast because he gets embarrassed easy. But, I think that when you do a value proposition or the cost of driving from Florida to Kentucky and the time that you'd have to take off work, hiring somebody like Austin Razor to go in where he could do. Austin is unbelievable with a chainsaw. So I've cut a lot of wood in my life, but what he can do to go in and TSI, knowing he's worked on my plans, he's worked on Don's farm, he's worked on my farm, but having a guy like that understands what we're looking for with the Higgins Outdoors package to come into your property, and in a day or two, he could do what you could do in a week. From driving up from Florida, I would explore options like that. If you want to get in touch with us, we'll put you in touch with Austin, or, we don't recommend too many people that we don't trust, but, Austin is one of the few kind of integrators of plans that have done work on Don and I's personal farm. So that's why we're able to say it, with confidence. There's a lot of other friends that we have in the business, but they also haven't done work on our farms. But, you get into different situations, and everybody has a skill set and should know their limits. And we talked about safety when you're in there hinge cutting or girdling or cutting down trees. Coming up from Florida by yourself and doing timber is dangerous, and to be there by yourself, don't be afraid to call in somebody that kind of specializes in this, like Austin would be. And I mean, he's even developed his business to where for out of state people, he's filling feeders and pulling trail camera cards. I know he does some work for you in Ohio for your places. So I think he does a lot of programs for out of state people. I told him, I said, he travels a lot with me when I do consulting work. He's not with me this weekend, but he's even offered to come and just spend a day teaching someone how to do TSI for, say, the first acre, and then turn the rest of it over to them. So don't be afraid in your situation, being out of state, when you really look at the true cost of your time and you driving all the way up, you might be able to do it done quicker by somebody who can fly in and do it fast.
Well, that's a good point. He's coming. Actually, Austin's coming to help me this spring, so
Yeah.
I can vouch for that guy in a chainsaw. My gosh, I just get out of his way.
Well, I think you said it. You said it the other day. He even for you. I mean, both of us have handled a chainsaw a lot in our life, but I mean, he could still cut in 2 days. He could cut what I could do in a week, and
Mm-hmm.
the average person just doesn't. It does cost money, but when you talk about your time, your fuel, your stay, all that kind of stuff, and he'll go anywhere in the Midwest now. So, and I know everybody that we're friends with that's real world dealers are going to say, why don't you talk about us? And it's always a delicate balance not to upset people. But, there's certain people that have done work on our own farms that we can vouch for. So that's why we talk about them. So yeah, I would definitely look at something like that as a potential alternative for you. It's, I always worry about when I go to Illinois by myself. The good thing that my wife has kind of confidence in is you're close, and we have other friends that are close, like Kyle Harmon and people that, if I did get hurt or something, that I got people within 20 minutes of me or something. But you got to be careful when you're out of town working like that.
Yep. Okay, next one's from Jeremy O'Donnell from Manhattan, Kansas. He says, Gentlemen, I love the podcast, but after listening to the most recent one, I felt compelled to write in. I agree that change is difficult, especially within the government. However, I think that you should be calling your viewers to action instead of telling us how difficult it is to change things. A quote by Edmund Burke is fitting here. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. If you need some biblical inspiration, Romans 12 verse 21 reads, Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. We all know that positive change is difficult. The struggle is real. My question is, do you think that all of your efforts to improve deer quality and hunting overall, whether teaching us through this podcast or standing up to poor legislation, has had a positive result? If your answer is yes, do you think that encouraging your listeners to try to fight against poor government policies and poor habitat will improve hunting for the future? The answer to both questions is a resounding yes. Thank you for all you have done. I believe that your efforts have had an impact, and every listener can positively impact poor policy by volunteering their time, staying informed, contacting legislators, joining organizations that support hunting, and continuing to be a good representative of our beloved way of life. Thank you for all you do. God bless you and your families. Jeremy, you're saying that you shared the only thing required for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. I have said that so many times. That is the whole problem with our country. It is good men doing nothing. I don't want to sound arrogant, but I don't think that I've been a good man doing nothing. I think if anybody has cost himself money by speaking up about things he believes in, it's this guy right here. And I've tried to be honest with the viewers based on my experiences. So, I've worked with hunting groups. I've been on the board of directors of various organizations, state organizations. I've tried to work with legislators, with DNR, and I've learned some lessons. If I was to go back and start over, 35 years ago, I would do things totally different, and that's what I'm sharing with the listener, is that writing your legislator is going to get you nowhere. And some of the other things that you've suggested are going to get you nowhere. That's based on my firsthand experience. If you want to enact change through change in game law regulations or whatever, there's only one way you're going to be successful. You're going to have to raise money, and you're going to have to hire a lobbyist. There's no other way. The money talks. Unfortunately, that's just the truth. And what I want to prevent is one of our listeners wasting his life like I did I shouldn't say wasting his life, but wasting much time in his life that he could have spent with his family or doing something productive, fighting a losing battle. If you're going to fight the battle, man, I'm behind you 100%, but you got to do it right. Don't follow the plan or the example that I set from my experience. Listen to my advice. I did it wrong. You've got to have a lobbyist. And there is literally no way to organize hunters. No way whatsoever. And you can pick any topic you want, and you can try to organize it. You can have the best idea in the world, you think, for the management of a deer herd or whatever. The one regulation change that every hunter in North America should be behind, and I promise you, there is going to be a very, very loud, vocal group that opposes whatever it is that is a no-nonsense, no-brainer change that everybody should be on board with. I've seen it firsthand. It comes down to money, because here's what happens. You're all for a certain regulation change, and for some political reason, your state DNR, whatever state it is, I'm not just talking about my state of Illinois, I'm talking about any state DNR, they are against whatever it is that you are for. They just tell the legislators who are voting on it, listen to this other group. These guys that want the change are the minority. Listen to how loud this other group is, complaining about it. They pit one side against the other. It's politics at its finest. No different than what's going on the federal level with this country, pitting rich versus poor, white versus black, gay versus straight. The government, to get what they want, they divide us. And it's no different with the state game agencies. They get what they want because they divide us, and then they tell the legislators, see, we got all these people on our side, and all those people on their side may only be 10%, but it's a very vocal 10%. So I'm not trying to discourage anyone from doing the right thing. What I am trying to discourage you from doing is making the same mistakes I made. Learn from my mistakes. If you're going to get involved, just know right out of the gate, you're going to have to raise a lot of money, and you're going to have a lobbyist. If you don't, you're going to get nowhere.
And then when you've raised a lot of money and then you've hired a lobbyist, you're going up against big money like the auto insurance industry, and all of this. Oh my goodness, I could go on in such a rant right now. If you again, I think what people misinterpret is we're not asking, or we're not telling people not to try. We're not telling it, but we think that you hold more power in your communities working with other hunters than you do fighting this corrupt bureaucratic government that we have. Landowners and lease owners and people that work on committees that govern and help with public land, those are the people that are going to make a difference. You and how you act on your properties you hunt as individuals are the only thing that's going to keep this thing afloat. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you are not going to go up against lobbyists that represent big insurance and have a chance. It's just the way it is. I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm just being a realist. This is the pessimistic side. Remember, we talked about this the other week. I'm the pessimistic guy, right?
Well, there's optimists, there's pessimists, and there's realists. And we're just being real here. I would love to see a bunch of young bow hunters in my home state of Illinois organize, have fundraisers, and try to enact some positive change. But I've been through the battles. I've tried to organize. I've been in groups that tried to organize. And I know it's a waste of your time.
Sorry. We'll get some hate mail over that one. But
I mean, it's just the truth. I wish it wasn't. You talk about all that's required for good men for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. Well, just look at our society and how we spend our money. I mean, we should be supporting businesses that are owned by like-minded people. Christians should be supporting Christian businesses, and conservatives should be supporting pro-conservative businesses. And we don't do that as a society at all. I mean, there's a very small minority of people that do that, and most of us, we'll pull up to a restaurant that's the most woke, liberal, anti-American haters possible, and we will give them our money. Starbucks, for example. How many people listening to this have been at a Starbucks in the last week? Or you can go right on down the line. I mean, Target and just. I probably ought to quit naming companies before we get sued, but it's ridiculous that we can't put our money where our views are. I mean, even I won't even go there.
We think that you should fight. We think that you should try, but it's going to be more grassroots than anything. It's going to be more what you do as an individual to make change in this country. You look at our friends from the Amish and Mennonite community and their communities themselves. They control that there. They're not going to the federal government and asking them to initiate change in their culture. They're doing that with their culture, with their church community, with their schools, with their children. They're taking the bull by the horns and controlling that for what they believe. That's part of the reason I respect them so much.
Well, we could even look at the hunting industry. There are companies in the hunting industry that are only in the hunting industry for one reason. That's to make money. They don't care about your success as a hunter. They don't care that you have success with their product. All they want to do is sell you something. They don't care about the game animals that we're after. They don't care about the proper management of our big game herds. They don't care about conservation. They care about one thing, making money, and yet hunters line up to do business with them and give them our money. And I'm not going to point fingers at any one company, but there's multiple companies out there that are only they don't give a crap about their customer. They don't give a crap about the deer. They don't give a crap about anything except making money, and yet we line up and we keep giving them our money. Well, I'd feel a lot better.
It's been a few weeks since you've done that.
I would feel a lot better if I could name some companies and some people.
Well, let's just say let's all go to Chick-fil-A and eat lunch tomorrow. Then,
hey, amen, brother. There you go. That's a perfect example. You go into a Chick-fil-A and it's totally different than any other fast food restaurant you'll ever go in. They're the most polite. It's clean for one thing. It's super clean. The people are so polite. They're closed on Sunday, but they make more money in 6 days than these other businesses do in 7. And yet people want to line up to go to Burger King, and you get a burger the size of a quarter that was cooked in some kind of a steam bath 6 weeks ago, and then just heated back up for you on a piece of moldy bun and rotten cheese. When you got a Chick-fil-A right next door. It's the same thing in the hunting industry.
I won't be eating at Chick-fil-A tomorrow. I'm in Amish country, so I'm going to be eating good with all my friends from down here. So maybe on the way back on Saturday, I'll stop at Chick-fil-A.
Well, let's not forget our GB brothers and sisters as well, because they know how to feed a guy too.
Yeah, there you go. Get a plug in for the Nicodemus family. All right. Yeah. Well, we appreciate you joining us this week. We'll be back to normal. Actually, no, we're recording live on Thursday night in Shipshewana next week, and I think we're going to try to get that on video and use that as our update on YouTube. But at the podcast on Thursday night, I believe we're on at 6:30. Is that right, Don? I think it's 6:30, 6 or 6:30 Thursday night.
We're going to play the Babe video at 6.
The
I
Babe
think,
video,
but
the Babe video at 6. Podcast, I believe, immediately after. Huge announcement for Lester's Feet. And then come back Friday night in the big arena with the Legends Roundtable. Probably one of the most honored requests I've ever been asked to do in my life, and I'm looking forward to it and sharing it with everybody.
and at that live podcast next week, we will be taking questions from the audience.
Right.
And I'm going to bet that nobody there can get me fired up.
You don't think?
Nope.
I bet there's a bunch of people that are going to be for the next week trying to think of questions to get you wound up.
Nope. I'm going to be on my best behavior, and I'm going to be calm and collected, and nobody there is going to fire me up next week.
Joe Miles said that he's going to have like one of them big fat heads of my face and your face in the back row and hold up signs to try to get us to laugh during the middle of it. He told me that the other day. Well, he's going to be heckling us.
We may laugh, but nobody's fired me up. I'm going to have calm, collected answers for everything.
So look forward to seeing you all at Shipshawana. We are not going to have a booth. Is that right? We're going.
Lester's Feet is.
Lester's Feet, but the Chasing Giants and Higgins Outdoors is not a booth. We're going to be bouncing around between Cloverleaf, Brenton Firearms, Gingrich Tree Farms. Osseo is going to have a booth there, so we're going to spend our time bouncing around at our sponsors and partners that are going to be at the show. So come find us there. Make sure you say hello. We love talking to everybody at these trade shows. It's one of our favorite things to do. We don't like trade shows, but we like talking to everybody that comes.
Yeah, the people are the best thing about the whole hunting industry.
All right, well, that's it for this week.
God bless everyone. See you in Shipshawana next week.
Take care.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.